In this tutorial, I'll be showing how to create a basic mod with the Restructure Engine. I'll be showing how to create a mod, how to add new characters, a new stage, and a new week. So in order to get started with creating a mod, you'll first want to head to the main menu, then press E by default. This will bring up the editor menu. You can change which key brings up this menu, but by default it's E. So first thing you'll want to do is go up to Create New Mod. And for this tutorial, I'll be using assets from the B-Side Redux mod as an example. This is not a tutorial for porting mods, I'm just using it as the example. So for mod name, type in B-Side Redux. And for mod description, I'll just type in a basic description. Now every time you create a mod, it will create some folders. You can set this to none to create no folders, simplified to create the basic folders needed for assets, basically the most common folders you'll use in a mod, and extended to create some additional less common but equally important folders. Leave it as simplified and hit create. Now once you've done that, I have the folder Restructure Engine is installed in, open right here. So go to that folder, click on mods, and now we have our mod. This polymod meta file is the file that tells Restructure Engine everything about the mod. Now Restructure Engine uses a modding system called Polymod. It's the same thing that regular Friday Night Funkin will be using in the future. And it works a bit differently from how Psych Engine's modding system does. With Psych Engine, each mod is treated as its own individual entity, and unless explicitly specified, none of them can interact with each other. However, in Restructure Engine, every mod is treated as part of one collective group of assets. And they can all interact with each other, and they can interact in such a way that they override each other. Because of this, when creating mods for Restructure Engine, you'll want to name things in such a way that they are not likely to have the same name as assets from another mod. And the best way to do this is to put everything in its own folder. So for example, if I go to the images folder, I'll create a new folder in that folder called B-Side Redux. And put these three folders inside that one. And once that's done, I'll copy that folder name and apply it to some other folders. Now the data folder is a bit different because each folder inside the data folder is read directly, whereas the images folder is the root folder for most things that read it. So you want data, characters, B-Side Redux, data, songs, B-Side Redux, data, stages, B-Side Redux. And you don't want to do this for the weeks folder. This does not read any sort of subfolders, at least not currently. So you'll just have to test your luck with that one. Now if we go to the songs folder, we'll also want a folder in there called B-Side Redux. Now, in order for the game to actually detect this new mod, we'll have to restart it. So back to the root folder, close out of Restructure Engine, and open it yet again. Once we're in, if we go to mods, you will see it there. Now, all new mods are enabled by default, but Restructure Engine only refreshes the mod list when the game is first loaded up. So that's why you see this down here. So before we can get to creating data files, we need to add in some assets. Over here, I've already put together all the assets from B-Side Redux that I'll be putting in the mod. So I'll just get started with putting them in. First up, character assets. These are the sprite sheets and associated XML files that the characters use. Now for B-Side Redux, I'll only be doing week 1, which is why there's so little things in this folder. So go to the mod. From the mods folder, you'll want to enter the folder for your mod. Go to images. I realize this is not properly centered. Images, B-Side Redux, and characters, and from here I'll drag in everything. Same for the icons, which I've already separated. They're not normally separated in B-Side Redux, and you can actually use an icon sheet in Restructure, but I will not be going over that in this tutorial. Now for stages, it's a bit different. We need to create a new folder in here with whatever name we will use for our stage. In Restructure Engine, every stage has its own folder of images. So I want to create a new folder, call it stage, and we're good. Now unless you've already done the subfolder thing, you won't want to do this since there's already a stage in regular Friday Night Funkin called stage. But since we already did this folder thing, we don't have to worry about that. Inside that folder, we'll put all the images for our stage. Now, since I'm using an existing mod as base, I can put in the charts from that mod. And of course, this is where the charts go. Just the one difficulty each. And the actual song files will go in here. So now we have all the assets. We just need to put them together in the game. So back in the main menu, press E again to bring up the editor's menu. Let's start with creating a new character. And when you click on most of these, you'll get a menu like this, saying new, load, or cancel. So click on the character editor, click on new, and it won't show up in the video, or maybe it will. So when you click on new, you'll get this file browser. And once you have this file browser, it may not be in the right directory, so just go ahead and find whatever directory your engine is, your copy of Restructure is installed in, and navigate to it, like so. So once you've done that, go into the mods folder, B-Side Redux, or whatever mod you are making. Go to images, B-Side Redux, characters, and select the PNG file for whatever sprite sheet or sprite set or whatever you're using is using. I'll do boyfriend first. So once you've done that, you'll be in the character editor. Now there are a lot of options in the character editor, or at least a lot of things you can mess with. You don't need to worry about most of them, but this is what you'll first see. So whenever you create a new character, the engine will look through its sprite sheet for an idle animation and create one. So first things first, if you go to the Properties tab, you'll see this thing called Lock. And what Lock does is it prevents you from moving around the character. This is just here to prevent you from doing it accidentally. So in order to move around the editor, you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, right click with the mouse and drag to move the camera, and if you uncheck Lock, you can left click and drag to move the character. You can also use the arrow keys to move the character more precisely. Mouse is for efficiency, arrow keys are for precision. Now if we go back to the General tab, we'll see a few things. Animation Ghost, for example. If we click on this animation to play it, we will briefly see the animation ghost in the background. If we right-click on this animation, the animation ghost will play it. We also have preview position, which is basically what slot of the stage the character's in. So normally 0 is the boyfriend slot, 1 is the opponent slot, 2 is the girlfriend slot. Preview stage is, of course, which stage the character editor will use. And all of this stuff is pertaining to whatever other character you may want to use as a reference. Since we're using B-side boyfriend here, we'll use regular boyfriend as his reference. Now, another important thing is the facing flag. Restructure Engine will save what side a character is meant to be on, whether that be the boyfriend side or the opponent side, and will flip the character's offsets based on that. So if they're on the wrong side, they will still look correct instead of sliding all over the floor. So this facing flag determines which direction they're in by default. Right is usually used for opponents, left is usually used for boyfriend, and center is usually used for girlfriend, or just any character that doesn't get flipped, like characters in a first-person perspective. So since we're using boyfriend, we'll set this to left, and that will automatically set his preview position to 0. So we'll set the other preview position to also be 0. We'll also flip the character so he's actually facing left, and we'll position him so that he roughly lines up with where regular boyfriend is. And now we can turn this off. So generally you'll want lock to be checked unless you're actively trying to move positions by adjusting offsets and stuff. Next up is camera position. This can vary quite a bit based on the idle. In normal Friday Night Funkin, the camera position will base itself on the center of whatever the first frame of the sprite sheet is. This is why the center of a character can sometimes appear to be more like the upper center, since the first frame of animation will usually be a down pose, and they tend to be shorter than the idles. This is especially prevalent with characters like the mom in week 4. But for Restructure Engine, it will attempt to center the character based on whatever their first animation is, and that's usually the idle. So clicking test will snap the camera to wherever their character's camera position is relative to the character, and clicking set will attempt to assign a character position based on wherever the camera is. Now it does this in values of 5. So if you click set and then test, the camera may move slightly, and that's because it's snapping it to 5. But for this example, I'll just set the camera position to what it is by default for boyfriend, which is 100x negative 100y. Now because Game Overs uses slightly different camera positioning, these values are used for both, but interpreted in different ways. So let's add animations. Now since this idle is already looking how it should, we'll just go ahead and add in the sing animations. And obviously there's a lot of animations here, but I'll just stick to the sing animations and the hey animation for simplicity's sake. Now the animation name is the name that the game understands, and here we have a list of commonly used ones. This is also a field that you can enter text in, so you don't have to use these, they're just there for convenience. The prefix is the animation name in the sprite sheet, or in Adobe Animate, or what have you. And this is a list of every prefix that the game found in the sprite sheet. So for this, we'll select BF no left. Indices, we don't need to worry about that just yet. FPS is basically how fast or slow the animation is, and loop will make the animation play repeatedly Trailing frames is for if you want the end of an animation to repeat. So for instance, if a character has like flames coming out of their head or glowing eyes like Daddy Dearest, that's what that's for. And held frame is a frame that the animation will stop at if the character hits a hold note, and then the animation will resume after the hold note is finished. So this is for characters who have animations where they close their mouths at the end of them. Prevents idle is for any animation that you want to force the game to not interrupt with the idle animation. So the game can interrupt animations with the idle, and this will prevent them from happening. And then next animation is whatever animation plays after the current one. So let's add this animation. Whenever you add an animation, you can actually stop it and play it again. And you can actually cycle through its individual frames. So this is useful for any of these parameters which require frame numbers. I'll just go ahead and add in the rest of his singing animations all at once. And I generally like to add animations all at once and then do offsets, but you can do whatever you want. So if I select this and hit Control X, it'll clear it. If I hit Control V, it'll paste, and Control C is copy. Pretty much every text field in the game has copy and paste implemented. So since hey is not in this list of animation names, I'll just enter it manually and add it. So now we do offsets. Now, in order to do offsets, we need to uncheck the lock position. And I like to zoom in on offsets because moving both the character position and the offsets with the mouse is affected by the zoom. So if you're zoomed in, things will move slower. If you're zoomed out, you can move things faster. So if you hold Shift while clicking and dragging, then you'll move the offsets instead of the character position. And this also applies to the arrow keys. So you can just do this by eye, or if you have specific numbers for the offsets, you can just sort of replicate them. There's no way to directly enter in offset numbers as of the making of this video. And that actually looks fine as it is. So I'll leave it alone and check the lock button once again. Now, in this case, we're pretty much finished. If you don't enter in the game over character field, it will attempt to find it by default by just looking for anything that's the character's name with dead at the end. Script is for if you want the character to use a specific script other than the default one that it'll use. And if you don't enter in a health icon, the character will automatically look for that as well based on its name. But you can also select a specific one. Now we can save. And in this case, I'll save it in the mod folder, data, characters, B-side redux, BF. Now once that's done, we can exit out of here and check them out in the game. We just go to free play, pick a song, hit Control to open up the sandbox, which is a feature of Restructure that basically allows you to play with parameters of a song like the speed and the stage and the characters. Now this is useful for previewing characters and stages that you just added that don't have a song yet, or if you want to just have fun with it. Now, obviously this is a pretty short list, so I can just scroll down and find my new character. But if the list gets too long, either from a large amount of mods or a particularly big mod, you can also type in things to filter the list. So if I type in BF, that'll filter just those things.
Three, two, one, go!
And he's in. Now, Restructure Engine won't look like this when you boot it up for the first time. These are just the settings that I use when I'm playing the game. So I have beat coloring on, I have the green note changed to yellow, things like that. So let's go ahead and create some more characters. So once again, go to New, Images, B-Side Redux, Characters. This time let's do Girlfriend. Now I already know the Girlfriend is lined up normally. In fact, if we turn on Other Anim Ghost and set to GF, we can see that they're basically already in the same position. So we don't need to reposition her. Now, this is obviously not the idle animation. We're just going to ignore that for now. And of course, Girlfriend actually has 2 idle animations. And if we go through the prefix list, we can see GF Dancing Beat. And we'll select Dance Left and add that animation, except it goes both ways. So this is how Girlfriend works normally. And in order to give her left-right animations, we're going to use indices. So if we click on all indices, then it'll give us a number range that just shows all of the frames in whatever the current animation prefix is. If we click this again, it goes away because it's resetting the properties of this tab. Now this is, you can't see it here, but this goes from 0 to 29, which means there are 30 frames in, which means the first animation will be the first 15 frames, the next animation will be the next 15 frames. Now we can very quickly create a range of indices by typing in -1, 0, 14. Now if we add animation, it's just the left one. This -1 tells the engine that the second and third numbers are a range, and that it should add every number in between those two, including those two. So we do something similar for Dance Right, setting the numbers to 15 and, oh, that's not right, 15 and 29. And then we have a right. So now we just click this animation, hit delete on the keyboard, click yes, and it's gone. Now this does interfere with these properties over here. The first animation is already set, but the idle animations are set to idle, which obviously is not the case. If we just click Fill Anim Fields, it'll fix that for us. Now this idle animations field can have as many animations as you want. This button below will only detect idle and dance left, dance right. Other than that, it won't really do anything. But you can set this to whatever you want. You can have as many animations as you want, as many repeats as you want, and it'll work. Now while I'm here, I may as well mention the dance speed field. Dance speed basically affects how many beats there are in between each dance. So if it's set to 1, the character will dance on every beat. If it's set to 2, the character will dance every other beat, and this is the default for Psych Engine, except for characters with left-right animations where the default is 1. In Restructure, the default is 1 no matter what, unless you're porting a Psych character, in which it'll use the same determining factors. Now to keep things simple, I'm only going to add the dance animation and the cheer animation. Actually, for GF it's called cheer. Update animation. Turn on the animation ghost. Right click to play the animation. And click lock. And line this up. And there we go. Now since Girlfriend is facing forward, we set her facing parameter to center. And we're good. So now we save that. Data, characters, B-side redux, GF. Lastly, let's create the DAD. So press escape to get back to this menu. Character editor, new, images, B-side redux, characters, DAD. Now of course, Dad has his beautiful sparkling eyes. So if we go to the Animations tab, we'll want to set the trailing frames. And I'll set them to 4 because I already know that his sparkling eyes take up 4 frames. And set them to 4. And it works right off the bat. So other than that, we just repeat the process. And because I already set the trailing frames to 4 and I'm not resetting it, it's going to set the trailing frames to 4 for all of the animations. So this is the equivalent of having a loop animation in Psych Engine. Restructure Engine does still support loop animations. This is just another way of doing the same thing, basically. Except you don't have to know the indices by heart or anything. Once we've done this, we can go ahead and do our offsets, just like we did before. Also assign a camera position. Just do it quickly by eye, and then manually adjust the numbers. And then we'll save the character. All right, let's make a stage. So click on Stage Editor, click on New, navigate to the Images folder, B-side redux, Stages, Stage, and click on any image in this folder. The main reason I did it this way instead of just having a folders selector is because the folder selector is very small and inefficient, and it's just not as good looking as the file selector. So when you create a new stage, this is what it looks like at first. So camera starting position is just where the camera is when the stage first loads. Camera zoom is, of course, how zoomed in the camera is by default. Pixel perfect, this is for any stage with pixel art, such as the week 6 stages. This just makes everything line up nice and neat. And you can even see if we check it here and then zoom in, things get a little bit snappy. Then if we uncheck this, they're more smoothly aligned. And of course, script is what it is for the character editor. Grid snapping affects the way things snap when they're moved. Basically, it's a number to align all the values to so that you don't get a bunch of weird numbers. So characters by default are in fairly standard positions. Now you can have as many character slots as you want in a stage, and you can even have as little as 2, so you can get rid of girlfriend if you want. So each character has their own properties, which direction they're facing, which layer they're on, which basically affects the order they're spawned in, their scale, their scroll factor, which affects how they work in terms of the parallax effect that you get when the camera is moved. Their camera offset is where the camera is in relation to them on a specific stage. If you set this to absolute, this will just be where the camera is when it's supposed to focus on them. Instead of, so that means it'll be a specific value instead of a value relative to the character. If we go to pieces, or go to the pieces tab, please don't go to pieces, we will be able to add in parts of a stage. Now if we go to type, we'll see 4 types by default. Static is just anything that doesn't animate on its own. Animated, of course, is anything that does animate. Tiled is anything that repeats infinitely. And group is for image groups that are used by scripts. So, for example, the week 7 stage has groups for cutscenes. So I zoom back to 8. And these 3 types are scripted types, which are used for specific stages. For example, the train in week 3 and the car in week 4 and the tank in week 7. We just set this to static and add in a wall. So if we turn off lock positions, then we can drag our wall around, just move it somewhere. If we go to the Properties tab, we can change some things about this wall. Scroll factor means the same thing it does for the characters, that being the parallax effect. Starts visible, this is for anything that you want to be invisible that is shown with a script. Scale is how big or small a stage is. Update hitbox affects the piece's internal size. If you turn this off, then scale will be based around the center of the piece, and if you turn it on, scale will be based around the corner of the piece. This is primarily for porting when different objects have different values for update hitbox. Now, alignment determines what the piece's coordinates refer to in terms of the piece. So by default, it's top left, which means the piece's position is where the top left of the piece is. But if you set this to, for example, middle center, then the piece's position will determine where the center of the piece is. Now this can be useful for stages that you intend other stages to be derived from. For example, in the limo stage, the dancers have their alignment set to bottom center. So if you have some kind of skin mod that changes the look of the dancers, they'll still be standing on top of the limo, no matter what their size is. Layer is where the stage is in relation to the characters. So for example, if you have the layer set to a higher number, then it'll appear over top of the characters. And that's useful for foreground elements like the curtains, which we'll add later. Anti-alias is basically smoothing. Generally, you only want to turn this off when you're making a pixel stage, because otherwise it just makes things look bad. Alpha controls how see-through a piece is. I'll put it on top of the character so you can see that easier. Blend mode is how the piece affects anything that it's on top of. Most of these don't work, but I included them all anyways. So normal is the default one. Add is generally used for lights to make things brighter. Multiply is also something generally used for lights, except it can make things darker. And I think screen is the other one that actually works, but it's very similar to add. Anyways, we'll leave that alone. So we'll add in a floor, drag it to about the right position. That looks about right. So once we have our floor in place, we can actually start moving our characters. So I'll just move them into some positions. And this is about where the characters are in relation to each other normally. So let's add some more pieces. Next up are the curtains. Now by default, a new piece will take on the properties of whatever the currently selected piece is. This is why the curtains appear at the bottom of the screen, because they're appearing at the same position as the floor. Now let's move the curtains to the top layer so they'll appear over top of these guys. And we'll increase our scroll factor not by that much. So they move a little more than the characters. Select the curtains, and insert piece will add something behind another piece. Add piece, as you've been seeing, will just add something to the top. So if we want to add these lights, we can insert them here, drag them around, and make them a little smaller. Decrease their scroll factor. And we'll also add light beams. Now, these should be on top of the lights. We can fix that by moving the piece in the piece order list. And that's done with these. And just for a little additional flair, we'll change the stage lights blend mode to add and increase its alpha to about that. So now we have our stage. Now, of course, by default, these are the characters that will be used to preview your stage. You can change these characters to whichever ones you want. So if I type in B-side Redux, we'll get only the characters in this folder. So we can change our preview characters like so. We'll go and save that. Make sure you go to the base mod folder, data, stages, B-side Redux, and save. Now the location and file name of your stages is very important to get right, since it's associated with the image folder that you created earlier. So let's add a week. So we go to week editor, new. Now because B-side Redux doesn't use the normal week menu, I don't have special characters for this, but that doesn't matter. Condition basically determines which menu it'll show up in. By default, it's both. If you set it to story only, it'll only be in the story menu. If you set it to free play only, it'll only be in the free play menu. Difficulties are, of course, whatever difficulties you can select for your week. By default, it's easy, normal, hard. So if you just type in normal, that'll be fine. If we want to add in more difficulties, we can use a comma and type in hard, for example. So starts locked, hidden when locked, and weak to unlock should all be pretty self-explanatory. That's just for locking systems and unlocking systems. If we go to songs, we can add in a song. So for example, we'll just add in the B-side Redux songs. Select that ID and click add. Now, if you select a song ID after selecting a song, then the game will try to automatically determine who the opponent in that song is and use their icon. Now, we haven't messed with these charts yet, so right now they'll still use the A-side characters. So if you want to select the icon manually, we can do that here. Now, by default, they won't show up, and in order to get them to show up, here's what you need to do. So save this week, data, weeks, B-side, week 1, escape, and let's go to the chart editor, click load, and load in a chart. So this is the chart editor. It's primarily styled after Arrow Vortex, which is a chart editor for Stepmania and Eterna, which creates chart files for those for that format. Now up here you'll see the file directory of your current chart. As you can see, I can click and drag to select things. See a lot of options here, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to focus on characters and properties. So we'll at the stage to our B-side Redux stage and set all the characters to their B-side Redux versions. Now, like in the stage editor, you can have as many characters as you want in a chart, and you can even have just 2 if you don't want girlfriend to appear. So once you've done that, you can go ahead and save the chart. Now, if you're using charts from other mods, I'd recommend going to Properties and clicking New Chart Format. That'll basically change the format of your chart to a more efficient one that Restructure Engine uses. Basically, it saves all the notes in beats instead of milliseconds, which means the numbers are a lot smaller, and it can even detect when a section matches the previous section and other things just to make chart files a lot smaller. So you noticed before when I saved it was 7 kilobytes, and now it's only 5. Which is a small difference, but it is a difference. And that difference can get even smaller depending on how many repeated sections you have in your chart. I'll go over charting and the chart editor in more depth in a different tutorial. But for now, let's go back to the week editor and load up our week. So now, when I select this song, we get the B-side Redux tab. And all the B-side Redux icons are in the icon list. Let's go ahead and add in the other 2 songs and fix their icons. That was not the right thing. You can also have per song difficulties, which only applies in free play. You can give a song a different title in the free play menu. Character count and character labels are for the sandbox for any songs that have more than 3 characters. And custom state is if your song is not a song at all, but is instead a custom thing, like a menu or something. This can be useful if you want to make a mod with like character costumes, like in Doki Doki Takeover versus Imposter. Now let's head over to the Story tab. Now you notice that these characters are white, and that's because in the Real Story tab, they are manually colored yellow. But they're not colored yellow in the menu. Now if you can click up here, you can give your new week a name. And unlike regular FNF, this name doesn't have to be all caps. You can just set it to whatever you want. Week button image is the image that is used for the week, of course. Week banner is if you want a background, like in Psych Engine, but there are none by default. Week background color is the color of the normally yellow background. And custom state means the same thing here as it does for a song, except for a week. If you have a week that leads to something other than playing a song, then you would put that here. And of course, these slots are for the characters that appear in the week menu. As long as you've done that, go ahead and save your week again. And once we leave, you will see that the story menu and the free play menu are both different. We can actually select between mods. If we select Friday Night Funkin', we'll get the base game weeks. When we select B-side Redux, we'll get our new week. This is the same thing for the free play menu. At least it should be. Well, that was weird. I might have to fix that, or I might not. It's not really a game-breaking bug, so I might just leave it in. But anyways, you can see that we have categories now. One of them is the base game, and one of them is B-Side Redux. So if we hop into a song, it will have our custom characters and our custom stage.
3, 2, 1, go!
And there it is. And you can play it. And it works. So, that was a brief introduction to modding with Restructure Engine. Just getting started with certain things. I hope this has been helpful to anyone who either wants to use Restructure Engine or has tried to use Restructure Engine. Thank you for watching.